What happens when an unstoppable brand of confidence meets a host whose gift is composure? In a studio scented with espresso, rubber mats underfoot, and the red glow of the on-air sign, Meghan Markle sits across from Joe Rogan, ready to set the record straight. Headphones on, waveform jumping within minutes, a simple question about influence becomes a precise debate over truth, fame, and ego. The room looked exactly like 1,000 online screenshots, mismatched curios on the shelves, a skull or two in the background, faintly humming neon, and that stubbornly warm light that felt like a late-night kitchen table. Rogan's crew moved like a pit team, quiet, capable, gone the instant they weren't needed. Joe took his seat with the loose ease of someone who spent a lifetime behind a mic. Meghan arrived 5 minutes before call time in precision armor. Cream blazer, clean lines, confidence for days. She shook the producer's hand like accepting an award. When Joe stepped forward, grinning, palms open, she offered a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Appreciate you coming," Joe said. "I think we'll have fun." "Fun would be nice," she replied, adjusting the headphones. "I don't get that a lot from interviews." The red halo lit, on air. Joe opened as he always did, light, welcoming. "All right, friends. Today's conversation is one I've been curious about for a while. Meghan Markle is here. We're going to talk influence, responsibility, the modern media ecosystem, maybe even mushrooms. Who knows?" "Not mushrooms," Meghan said with a small, airless laugh. "Let's keep it elevated." Joe chuckled. "We can do elevated. So, when you think about the last few years, what's the most misunderstood thing about you?" "That I need to be understood," she answered instantly. I'm not a product to decode. The obsession with categorizing me is the issue, Joe. People want simplicity because it's easier than nuance." Joe nodded. "Nuance is the whole point of long-form conversation." "Exactly," she said, as if she'd invented the format. "Which is why I'm here to talk, not to be boxed." "Cool," Joe said. "Let me ask what's on a lot of minds. When you step into a media moment hand, you've stepped into many. How much is messaged and how much is just you being you?" She sat taller. "There is no divide. I am the message. My existence challenges narratives that were never built to include me." Joe waited a beat. The line could mean 100 things. He tried to distill. "So when critics say some of your big sit-downs felt curated is what professionals call prepared." She cut in. "Men get to be prepared. Women get accused of staging." Joe kept his voice warm. "Or maybe people just notice production lighting, edits, music cues. That's not gender. That's TV. It becomes gendered when the subject is me," she said. "I've seen that pattern. You should too." He glanced toward the glass. The waveform fluttered like a heartbeat. "Okay," Joe said, pivoting. "Let's talk responsibility. You have a massive platform. When you advocate, say, for mental health, do you worry your personal experience gets taken as universal advice?" "You mean, do I worry I'm too influential?" she asked, straight-faced. "I mean, personal stories can be powerful and also incomplete," Joe clarified. "People hear them as prescriptions." "That's a framing problem," she replied. "Not a me problem. If someone hears my reality and decides it's a universal rule, that's on the listener or on a media environment that flattens women's experiences into tropes." Joe took a breath that could have been a sigh. "I don't flatten people. I ask questions. It's my job. And it's my job to remind you not every question deserves the dignity of an answer," she said sweetly. "Asking can also be a way of centering you, not the subject." The temperature dipped. Joe felt it. He'd navigated fighters bristling before a bout, comedians mid-spiral, scientists consumed by one obsession. He recognized a defensive rhythm. The trick was lowering the shoulders without lowering the bar. "Look," he said, hands open, I'm not trying to center me. I want to understand you beyond headlines. People tune in because they can smell scripted talking points. They want the human thing. I'm giving you the human thing, she said, eyes cool. It just happens to be more disciplined than you're used to. There it was, again disciplined, wrapped like a verdict. Joe tried a different angle. You talk a lot about agency, he said. What's one choice you made this past year that even surprised you? She considered, then didn't. Coming here, he barked a laugh. Why? Because I knew you'd be charming about it, she said. You'd say you're just curious, just a guy having conversations. But curiosity without context repeats harm. It's the friendly face of extraction. Joe blinked. Extraction? You get views. You get clips. You get to say, I platform everyone. Meanwhile, I get dissected by people who are never going to listen in good faith. That's extraction. He felt the moment shift from dialogue to courtroom and chose patience. One think long-form listeners do come in good faith, he said. They stay for hours. That's not hate scrolling. That's attention. Attention is a commodity, she countered. Respect shows up as restraint. If someone sets terms, you honor them. I'm honoring them, Joe said evenly. I'm honoring you by asking for more than a press release. A thin smile. No one said you're entitled to depth. The producer's eyes flicked up. Joe kept his focus on Meghan. He'd sparred with ideologues, zealots, drop-ins who loved the lamp's heat more than the work of thinking. He wouldn't add volume, all need clarity. Okay, he said. What terms do you want honored right now? That we don't play bad faith, she replied. No insinuations dressed as questions. No, some people say. If you have a point, make it and own it. Fair enough, Joe said. Here's a direct one. Do you think some backlash you've gotten is tied to how controlled you seem in high-profile moments? People feel they're meeting a brand, not a person. She lifted her chin like looking over a balcony. People mistaking composure for calculation isn't my job to fix. If authenticity now means chaos, I'll pass. So your public self is your most authentic self? Joe asked. It's the most considerate, she said. Considerate of myself. Boundaries aren't PR, they're mental health. A thoughtful point, delivered like a slamming door. He nodded anyway. Boundaries are good. I'm saying real conversation needs some vulnerability. Otherwise, it's a press conference. And yet here you are, she said, confusing vulnerability with access. I'm confusing nothing, he said. I'm asking for something unscripted. I don't do unscripted, she smiled, sharp. I do intentional silence stretched, elastic and audible in the headphones. Joe broke it lightly. Intentional is good. Let's be intentional about something practical. Young people look up to you. If a 20-year-old says, I want purpose like yours, what's the first concrete habit? Stop asking permission, she said. From parents, bosses, strangers online, especially from men with microphones. Joe laughed despite himself. That's a good line. It's not a line. It's instruction. Okay, instruction taken. He leaned in, voice warm again. Second habit. Refuse false choices, she said. I'm tired of being told I must be either grateful or critical, soft or strong, private or public. I can be both. I am both. That's human, Joe agreed. But when bothness becomes a shield, I'm both, so I'm beyond critique. People push back. You're projecting, she said slowly. People push back because I won't play the character they wrote for me. And what character do you think I'm asking for? The one who cries on cue, she said. The one who slips and gives you a viral moment. The one who feels small next to your brand of big-hearted masculinity. Joe's eyes softened. I don't want you small. I want you real. Real isn't your audience's property, she said evenly. Real is mine to define. He glanced at the steady red light. He thought of guests who arrived armored and left lighter sometimes because he pushed. Sometimes because he didn't. With Meghan, pushing felt like leaning on glass. You could see everything. You couldn't get through. Let me try this, Joe said, palms up. What's the last thing you changed your mind about? She didn't blink. Whether to do this? You changed your mind. I told my team I wouldn't, she said. Then I thought, no, why yield ground? Why let the narrative run without me? So I came. A gift to me. Joe asked. To your listeners, she said. They deserve better examples of women setting terms. He smiled, thin. I think they deserve an honest back and forth. And they're getting it, she said. You're pushing your angle. I'm rejecting it. That's the back and forth. He felt the hour settling into a familiar shape, the kind where the talk never quite lands, where curiosity is read as attack, and the host must choose between saving the vibe or defending the premise. Joe chose the premise. Meghan, he said, gentle but firm. I don't bring people here to trap them. I invite them because conversation is one of the last places we practice being human together. If every question is taken as an imposition, we won't get anywhere. She laced her fingers like a verdict. Then let's get nowhere beautifully. The waveform spiked, then leveled. Someone outside the glass exhaled. Joe rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar burn of a talk drifting toward theater. He leaned to the mic, careful as threading a needle in an earthquake. All right, he said. Let's keep going. Hour 2 restarted. Joe adjusted his mic, sipped coffee, and searched for the easy groove his audience loves, half philosophy, half barbershop banter. Meghan crossed her legs, poised sharp enough to cut glass. During the break, she'd been on her phone, scrolling with the certainty of someone both controlling and documenting her narrative. Okay, Joe smiled. Meghan, we've covered perception and influence. Let's pivot. You've spoken about mental resilience and self-care. What does that look like day to day? She gave a small laugh, half amusement, half condescension. Joe, it's not a checklist. It's a mindset. You don't wake up and say, time to be resilient. You are resilient. It's innate. Sure, Joe nodded. But a lot of listeners want something concrete. How do you handle stress meditation, journaling, cold plunges, anything? That's the difference between you and me, she said, tone suddenly clipped. You want a soundbite. I'm living it. I don't need to brand my healing routine. I'm not asking for branding, Joe said, brow lifting. I'm asking for something people can relate to. Relatability, she echoed with a rising smile. There's that word again. Everyone wants to relate to someone they secretly resent. Disdain flickered, caught by the mic-like static. Joe drew a slow, deliberate breath. I think people are curious, not resentful. They want to understand how someone under that much pressure keeps going. Well, Joe, she said, straightening her blazer, I don't crumble when I'm underestimated. That's the difference. Fair, Joe stayed calm, but sometimes walking through what grounds you can help others. They should ground themselves, she said, gaze hard. You don't think you've ever inspired someone? Maybe, she shrugged, but I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not here to babysit the public's emotions. That's a bit cold, isn't it? Honest, she corrected. There's a difference. I'm all for honesty, he murmured. But empathy still matters. Empathy, yes, she said, silk over steel. Not emotional laborist, especially for people who've built careers dissecting me. You think this is dissection? Joe leaned in. I think it's veiled intrusion, she said. Every question assumes there's a version of me you deserve to access. That isn't empathy, Joe. That's entitlement. He let the words hang. The quiet hum filled with air, electricity and a tension thick enough to choke. "Meghan," he said softly, "I've had scientists, comedians, soldiers, people who lost everything. They came to share something real. I'm not entitled to it. I try to meet people where they are." "Exactly," she said, arms crossing. "You try. But you can't meet me where I am. You've never been there." He leaned back, nodding slowly. "You're right. I've never been royal, never under that spotlight. But I've been misunderstood. I've been called things I'm not. You chose that spotlight." She smiled thinly. "I was born into it." "Yeah, but you left it," he replied gently. "That was a choice, right?" "It was survival," she said. "You don't choose to leave toxicity. You escape it." "Okay," Joe steadied. "Now that you're out, do you ever feel you've built another kind of spotlight when you control, but one that still burns?" Her lips parted. "You love your metaphors." "They help people think," he chuckled. "They help you dodge accountability," she snapped. Real anger finally sparked. Joe felt it catch. "Accountability for what?" "For how you platform," she said. "You call it curiosity, but you feed the spectacle. You've turned conversation into content. That's basically the definition of a podcast." Joe tilted his head. She exhaled sharply. "See? You think that's clever? That's the problem. It's just honest," he replied, unflappable. "Everything's content, now your posts, my shows, this talk. The question is whether it carries meaning. Meaning can't survive mass consumption," she shot back. "It's noise. You can't monetize authenticity." Joe's smirk was faint. "Tell that to your Netflix deal." The room's air froze. The producer's eyes flicked up behind the glass. Meghan let out a slow, incredulous laugh. "Wow," she said. "You really went there." "You brought up authenticity," Joe replied evenly. "I'm saying the lines blur for everyone, not just you." "You think you're the first man to question my integrity?" she said, voice low and sharp. "You're not even top 10. Joe folded his hands, calm, as if walking a verbal minefield. "I'm not questioning it, time, examining it." "You're performing it," she shot back. "Pretending curiosity isn't just control with better PR." He paused, meeting her eyes. "You think I'm trying to control you?" "I think you're trying to humanize me on your terms," she said. "Which is worse?" Silence stretched. The air seemed to vibrate with static. Unlike tense moments he diffused before, this one didn't feel fixable. Meghan wasn't seeking to be understood. She was defending a fortress. He offered one last olive branch. "I actually think people want to understand your terms. That's why they listen." "They listen because you tell them who to listen to," she said coldly. "You build the arena and sell the tickets. I'm just the show." Joe exhaled slowly. "Then why come?" She smiled, half triumph, half mockery. "To remind the audience I don't belong to them, more to you." Joe looked straight into the lens, jaw tightening slightly. On the monitor, the waveform trembled as if it knew what was next. He turned back to her with professional restraint. "All right," he said. "Let's see if there's still a little truth to find in this." Meghan leaned in, voice steeped in confidence. "The truth is simple, Joe. I don't owe anyone, especially men with microphones, my vulnerability." Joe nodded once, controlled, unshaken. "Then maybe this isn't the right place for you." Just like that, the tone shifted, not an explosion, but the sound of two worlds closing off from each other. The on-air lights still glowed red, yet something else in the room had gone dark. The third segment opened on silence. Not accidental. The producer had muted the ambient bed, leaving only the air conditioner's hum and the faint squeak of Meghan's chair as she crossed her legs again. The earlier tension hadn't dissolved. It had hardened into something sharper. Joe leaned toward the mic with a weary composure, born of years handling unpredictable guests. "All right," he said lightly. "Let's reset a little. Meghan, I know you're not a fan of spectacle, but at its best, this show isn't about that, it's about conversation. You can talk about whatever you want. Let's start there. What do you want to talk about?" Meghan didn't look up. She adjusted her sleeve. "You want me to steer so you can pretend it was my idea all along?" Joe chuckled under his breath. "You're a tough guest, you know that?" She finally met his gaze. "I'm a woman who refuses to be patronized." "I'm not patronizing you," Joe said calmly. "I'm trying to understand why a conversation has to feel like a fight." "Because for women like me," she answered, "every question is a fight. You don't see it because you've never been on the other end." Joe leaned back slightly. "I've had plenty of fights," he said. "They usually involve people trying to win arguments, not prove their existence." That landed. For a heartbeat, Meghan's expression shifted surprise, then disdain. The producer's eyes shot up behind the glass. Meghan let out a slow, incredulous laugh. "Wow, you really went there. You raised authenticity," Joe said evenly. "I'm saying the lines blur for everyone, not just you. You think you're the first man to question my integrity?" She replied, voice low and sharp. "You're not even top 10. Joe folded his hands, calm in a verbal minefield. "I'm not questioning it, I'm examining it. You're performing it," she said. "Pretending curiosity isn't just control with better PR." He paused, met her gaze. "You think I'm trying to control you?" "I think you're trying to humanize me on your terms," she said. "Which is worse?" Silence stretched, the air buzzing like static. This didn't feel fixable. Meghan wasn't seeking understanding. She was guarding a fortress. He offered one last olive branch. "I think people want to understand your terms. That's why they listen. They listen because you tell them who to listen to," she said coldly. "You build the arena and sell the tickets. I'm just the show." Joe exhaled. "Then why come?" She smiled triumph, edged with mockery. "To remind the audience I'm not theirs or yours." Joe looked into the lens, jaw tightening, the waveform trembling on the monitor. He turned back with professional restraint. "All right," he said. "Let's see if there's still some truth to find here." Meghan leaned in, confident. "The truth is simple, Joe. I don't owe anyone, especially men with microphones, my vulnerability." Joe nodded once, steady. "Then maybe this isn't the right place for you." The tone shifted, not an explosion, but two worlds closing off. The on-air light still glowed red. Something else had gone dark. The third segment opened on silence deliberate. The producer had cut the ambient bed, leaving only the AC's hum and the faint squeak of Meghan's chair as she crossed her legs. The tension hadn't dissolved. It had hardened. Joe leaned to the mic with practiced, weary composure. "All right," he said lightly. "Let's reset. Meghan, I know you're not into spectacle, but at its best, this show isn't about that, it's about conversation. Say whatever you want. Start there. What do you want to talk about?" Meghan didn't look up. She adjusted her sleeve. "You want me to steer so you can pretend it was my idea?" Joe chuckled softly. "You're a tough guest, you know that?" She met his eyes. "I'm a woman who refuses to be patronized." "I'm not patronizing you," Joe said calmly. "I'm asking why a conversation has to feel like a fight." "Because for women like me," she said, "every question is a fight. You don't see it because you've never been on the other end." Joe leaned back. "I've had plenty of fights," he said. "They usually involve trying to win, not prove existence." She arched a brow. "So now I'm proving my existence. That's cute." Joe kept it light. "I'm saying you don't have to. People already know who you are, do they? She laughed, hollow. Or do they know the version tabloids wrote, talk shows painted? Men like you dissect for ratings. Joe breathed out through his nose, rubbing his thumb across his palm. You came on my show, he said gently. I didn't drag you here. I came, she shot back, to show what happens when a woman refuses to be edited. Well, Joe said. So far, you're doing a hell of a job showing that. There was humor in his tone and in hers. She leaned in, eyes narrowing. You think that's funny? I think it's ironic, Joe said. You're here to prove you can't be controlled, but you treat every word like a weapon. Maybe no one's trying to control you. Maybe people are just trying to talk to you. Meghan's smile returned, tight and deliberate. That's the illusion of men like you, Joe. You call it dialogue. It's stage dominance. Dominance. He blinked. You ask? I answer. You control the frame, the sound, the edit, the reach. You get to define what I meant. That's control. So a question is power, not curiosity. Joe tilted his head. Exactly, she said. And when I resist, I'm difficult. He smiled faintly. You said it, not me. Her eyes flashed. So now I'm difficult and defensive. Maybe I should smile more for your audience, right? Joe spread his hands. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to have a good faith conversation. And I'm trying, she said, dripping sarcasm, to have an intelligent one. The red on-air light burned in Joe's eyes like a small sun. He spoke softly. Words waited. You know, Meghan, I've talked to astrophysicists and MMA champions, and no one's called curiosity an attack. That's because they weren't women, she said. They weren't asked to bleed to prove they're human. You really think I want you to bleed? I think you want access. And when I don't give it, you call it arrogance. It's boundaries. Joe folded his arms. Boundaries are great. But when every question hits a wall, it stops being a conversation. Maybe that's your problem, she said coldly. You think access equals depth. Some of us don't perform vulnerability on demand. So this, he gestured around, isn't a conversation, it's a test. It's a mirror, she said. And you don't like what you see. A cinematic pause followed. Joe's hand hovered near his mug, lips pressed thin. He'd watched debates crumble and tempers blow. But Meghan was differentiating, wasn't just reacting. She was weaponizing control. He tried one more measured, respectful, human. Okay, if you had one message for people who still doubt you, what is it? Meghan smiled and finally relaxed into her chair. I don't need to convince doubters. That's a man's game. I exist beyond doubt. Must be peaceful up there, Joe murmured. She heard it, see? You can't handle a confident woman without calling it ego. Confidence is earned, Joe said, meeting her eyes. Ego demands the room bow first. That cracked the calm. You're unbelievable, she said. Do you hear yourself? You've interrupted, misrepresented, and now you're lecturing me on humility. My voice hasn't cut you off once, Joe answered, even. If you feel misrepresented, maybe the only safe version of you is the one that's never challenged. Her mouth opened, no words for a beat. Anger, pride, disbelief. You think you're so grounded, don't you? The everyman with a mic. The philosopher for gym bros. You think staying calm makes you right. He gave a half smile. No, it keeps me from saying what I'm really thinking. Say it, she dared, leaning in. I think you mistake resistance for strength. The silence hit like a shot. Even the producer froze behind the glass. Meghan blinked, then let out a humorless laugh. Well, that's a headline, isn't it? Not if you don't make it one, Joe said. Don't worry, she replied coolly. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here. I'm sure you will, he said, still composed. And with that, the third act of the podcast came to an uneasy close. Joe leaned back, arms crossed. Meghan stared down the table like a chessboard she refused to lose. The waveform pulsed, recording every breath, glare, and ounce of ego between them. Somewhere off mic, a producer whispered what everyone was thinking. This one's going to trend. The final minutes felt like a standoff. The on-air lights still burned, but the air was stale, too heavy to breathe, too sharp to save. Joe sat with folded hands, patience frayed but intact. Meghan, arms crossed, pinned him with a look that said, "I'm done pretending this is mutual." So, Joe began. Voice low but steady. "We've covered a lot. Control. Confidence, the press, your boundaries, and your ego." Meghan tilted her head. Tone final. "I've got one." Joe smirked faintly. "Comes with a mic. I also know when to turn it off." "Oh, convenient," she said. "You get to decide when the power dynamic ends." "You really think this is about power?" "It always is," she said, "especially when a man feels challenged." "You're right about one thing," Joe nodded. "This is about challenge. Not because you're a woman, because you came in treating conversation like interrogation. Then blamed me for asking questions." She laughed softly, not kindly. "You sound like every man uncomfortable with a woman who won't play along." "Maybe," Joe said. "Or maybe I'm done pretending arrogance is empowerment." That landed. The silence wasn't just tense. It was final. Joe glanced at the booth. "Cut the feed," he said quietly. The producer hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yeah," Joe said, still looking at Meghan. "We're done here." Meghan leaned back, unbothered door, pretending. "Running away already?" "No," Joe said, pushing his chair back. "Ending it before it gets uglier. You came for validation, not conversation." "That's not what I do." She arched a brow. "So this is how you handle women who won't flatter you?" "This is how I handle guests who mistake hostility for honesty," Joe said, standing. "We're done." The producer's hand hit the switch. The on-air light flickered, then went dark. Meghan sat a moment longer, her reflection faint in the glass, jaw set, eyes lit with pride and fury. "You'll regret that," she said. "I doubt it," Joe answered, and walked off, leaving her alone in the quiet studio, lit only by the soft red glow fading out overhead. Outside, the sound engineer muttered, "Well, that'll break the internet." Inside, Meghan adjusted her blazer, fixed her hair, and whispered just loud enough for the dead mics. They always do. Fade to black. If you enjoyed this showdown between confidence and composure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. More dramatic, real talk stories soon. Whose side were you on, Meghan's or Joe's? Tell us in the comments.